Okay, let's do some cleansing breaths, maybe some deep cleansing breaths, breathing in and hold for like 3 or 4 seconds and then whoosh out. Whooshing out the cobwebs kind of thing. We're entering into a time of more light, more light in the daytime when we can embrace the light and the sun just beaming around us for longer in the day so that we imagine how that affects our mind, body, spirit. It gives us light not only on our bodies, but when we call that light into our mind's eye, it gives us light inside our bodies. And that's an image that we can hold on to when we are feeling a little bit of darkness, because winter is technically still here. And with the way the climate is, we can't necessarily predict it's going to be light, it's going to be dark. So holding on to that light allows us to cope with the different changes. And now the changes in climate seem to happen regularly. One day it's cold, one day it's snowing, one day it's quite warm. The feeling of that uncertainty of temperature and precipitation can be quite confusing, because change can be quite confusing to us, no matter how small and no matter how big. We know that change will always come and we can't avoid it, but we have to know how can we cope with the change? How can we accept that change is here? Because for some, change is very unsettling. Because when we can't see it coming, we can't predict it, we are uncertain, it can make us feel quite out of control. And that notion of control is an interesting one, because we like to have some measure of control. And when we feel like we do, we imagine that we can predict, we can imagine that we can accept. But when we lose control for whatever reason, either it's external to us, climate change, or it's a health condition, or it's a job loss, or even the positive changes like welcoming someone new into our families, or finding a beautiful new location to visit that we're not used to. It's all part of change. And one of the beautiful things that we can bring to those experiences of change is really to bring curiosity. This is interesting. Instead of judging it and getting concerned that we are about to experience change, we just bring curiosity. We look at it with that beginner's mind. Because when change happens, we really are accessing our beginner's mind. Because we've maybe never experienced whatever the change is before, or maybe we've experienced something similar, but it's somehow different. because this is a new day, a new moment in time. And we can expect change even though we don't know what it is. So to bring a beginner's mind and curiosity to it allows us to accept instead of that resistance that often comes along with change. At its core, resistance can be very disconcerting. But what we know about resistance is that it comes from a place of fear. And fear is very challenging for many people because sometimes the mindset is, I'll never get over this fear. I'll never be able to accept this change. And yet we've had many, many experiences in our lives where fear and change have been there. And while it may not have been easy, we still know that we can get through it. Fear can really overcome us if we allow that feeling to embed itself in our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. Fear is built on uncertainty. Fear is built on the knowledge that maybe we do not have control of everything. And fear is perhaps one of the most challenging emotions for people to feel because they don't know. They don't know what's coming. They don't know how it's going to end. But sitting with the fear and watching it just percolate inside of our bodies, inside of our mind, body, and spirit, just watching it. And just understanding that we can name fear, we can call it what it is. We can watch it, but we don't want to plant that seed so that it grows like wildfire. Instead, when we feel that fear, we acknowledge, we accept, and we watch it drift away. We still have the knowledge that fear will arise again. Because sometimes we just walk out on the street and we see or hear something that brings fear up. But when fear has been embedded in our bodies for years and years and years, it just multiplies. It gets bigger and bigger because we have fueled that fire. We become fearful of the fear. And so facing the fear with a measure of courage, with a measure of knowing that we can move through that fear just by naming it. So when we are sitting in silence and we notice the churning and the yearning of emotions to come up, sometimes there's one or two, and sometimes it's like a little tornado, so much rolling around in there. And some of that fear and challenging emotions, maybe grief or sadness, has been there for many, many years, and it's just trying to come out. Which is why we have to just allow it to come up without being, as I said, fearful of the fear. And if we can meet these challenging emotions with an open heart, knowing that right now we are feeling fear, but we have that love and compassion for ourselves in our hearts. And that love and compassion for ourselves will overcome the fear because love will win when we allow the love to enter. So we cultivate love, love for ourselves, love for others, love for the environment, love for the whole planet. We cultivate that love by acknowledging that too. We often talk about allowing the challenging emotions to arise so that we can watch them drift away. But it's also important to allow that love and compassion to also arise. And when we feel that, we may sit longer with that feeling, embrace it, wrap it around ourselves like a beautiful blanket that is keeping us safe and warm. And the beauty of that love allows us to open our hearts. It opens our hearts and shines that beautiful light upon us. And so for the next number of minutes, just sitting with whatever is arising, letting the challenging emotions just float away. But if love arises, just embrace it, call it in, hold it in your heart, and let it wrap itself around you. But if that doesn't arise, that's okay. Today or this moment may not be the time, but there will be times. And so we'll sit in silence until you hear my voice again. May our bodies be free from pain. May our minds be open to possibility. And may our hearts be filled with love.